This is Ephraim Margolin. My subject today is Contra-Abandonment. 55 years ago, Rabbi White asked me to deliver a talk on Yom Kippur. I have done so 55 times with great anticipation. This has been the first time I have been unable to make it in person. But Gmar Hatima Tova, next year, I expect to be with you, speaking again. Every year, I come up with a different topic. This year, we will discuss the developing situation in Israel, threatening a great victory or loss for democracy in the world. I invite you to join with me analyzing what is happening in Israel as I speak of it. For my first 9 years, I did not know what I was. I lived among the Polish people, but I was not Polish, and some of the Poles told me. I was Jewish, but I did not know what that meant. I wanted to attract people like me, but I did not know how. Our landlord accused me and my parents of murdering Polish citizens. I felt as if there was a target painted on my back. Then Hitler came, and nobody could imagine that 1/3 of my people will be butchered. Nobody could believe that in Europe no Jewish life was possible in the future. I didn't know what Jewish life was, but it was an exciting idea. An idea that people like me can get together, pursue a life with them, which they themselves create, not like the life that was created for them and then taken away. In 1936, my parents saved my life. I was 9 years old, but I didn't know that Hitler was about to butcher all Jewish people like me, who did nothing else except trying to survive. Father sent me to Palestine. My mother came with me. In the next part of my life, I was in Israel. I did not understand what people were saying to me in Hebrew. They did not understand what I was responding to in Polish. Most of them did not speak Polish at all. In Palestine, there were also people who wanted to exterminate me. But there were people like me who slowly became Israeli, strong enough to be able to defend their own life. The beginning of my life in Israel was the life where there was a chance to survive if you could fight for your survival. But most of those who we thought would be fighting for us were already dead or dying in Europe. The new state of Israel had to invent their own way of creating a society, a way in which it could continue as a country where Jews could live and try to create a Jewish life. Though I did not understand it, the basic idea was that nothing will force you to do or be what you were not. The idea of being together, but growing each one on his own and trying to grow up and invent new ways. That is what made it possible for me to fall in love with the Israeli life, another definition of my survival. Then also there was a lot of luck. I joined the underground fighting the British mandate and eventually became the secretary of Menachem Begin, the leader of our then underground fight to become a nation of our own. That was the beginning of this story. In present-day America, politics split the voters. Liberal American Jews believed that things were as good as they are going to be in America. Conservatives believed that things need to be dramatically changed. We went through a period when our past president, Trump, was, quote, wrong, unquote, and lying. But a lot of Americans did not care. There was not one serious demonstration against a president who was about to lead us astray. I remember we were preparing for another election in which Trump did not lose his followers, in which nothing changed. Trump was indicted 4 times, and in the coming criminal trial, we will get a better picture of America today. Let me turn to present-day Israel. In Israel, half of the people were willing to fight the Netanyahu government so that the country of Israel could be a better country again, so that the government had its counterbalance when it was mistaken. Then Netanyahu was indicted and gathered about himself a variety of right-wing politicians on whom we now depend. I cannot lose my faith in Israel, which we created to have a fair and just government of our own. Nobody benefits from the Netanyahu government decision except for Netanyahu himself, the right-wing parties in Israel, and those who voted for him. Netanyahu the prime minister, decided to impose control over the Israeli judiciary, subservient to the extremes of his own government. Netanyahu decided to impose control of the judiciary so that he might enact laws without any meaningful judicial review. This is important because Israel was never meant to be a government ruling the state alone and unsupervised by anybody. Israel was meant to be a state in which both Arab and Jewish minority are protected against the Netanyahu government, in which it is possible to live as an Israeli the way I live in Poland as a child. Because the importance of protecting the minority makes the difference between a successful state and a state controlled by sheer unlimited power. When I was fighting for Israel independence, I was fighting for the ideal state of Israel. Every country where majority rules can be named democracy only if all we are concerned with is whether the majority controls. Majority always controls. But the possibility that any government can be mistaken requires a counterbalance. Netanyahu's government is trying to have no such safeguards at all. Israel has no constitution which can set limits for an extreme government's misconduct. Israel has no custom and nothing in the law to keep a mistaken government from a review when extreme accountable between elections. An ideal Israel still has had the majority controlling as an assurance that it cannot go beyond a reasonable action. However, reasonable action was eliminated in this Netanyahu period. For me, every government needs an ongoing review. The Supreme Court was in place precisely for that reason. Once you take the Supreme Court away as a power controlling governmental excesses, there is no remaining protection for the minority. Making the Supreme Court an arm of the executive branch of the government puts the minority at risk and puts a democracy at great risk. In 2023, for several months, a minority in Israel, and according to public opinion, a majority, demonstrated to return to some sort of controlled possible government impropriety. Tens of thousands of people, 500,000 Israelis in any given single demonstration day, stood up and fought for a better Israel, a country where the government is elected and the Supreme Court or any other rational counterbalance controls excesses of unfairness if they occur. It is difficult to imagine the enormity of what happened in Israel. 9 months of massive demonstrations, splitting the country from day to day. More than half of the Jewish Israelis objecting to the removal of court supremacy and determining what is acceptable in a fair Israel. Just the fact that the Supreme Court could invalidate bad or improper legislation made me believe in a fair Israel. I always believed it. I am full of admiration for the dissenters and impressed by their eagerness to change Israel for the better. In America, from liberal to conservative, it was always the same America in the end. We were not united, but in America there was always our Constitution to stop extremes that the government was about to perpetuate as a focal point for counterbalance. Israel has no constitution, for Jews never could agree on anything. Israel never agreed to create a constitution. Israel had no legislation to assure government fairness, so that the only thing that counts in the Israel of Netanyahu, when Supreme Court controls are invalidated, is whatever the government decrees. This is the final word. There is no control over government decisions as they happen. All this is important because Israel was never meant to be a government state with no checks and balances. Israel is meant to be a state in which the Jewish and Arab minority are protected, in which it is possible to live as an Israeli the same way I lived as a Jewish boy in Poland among other neighbors, in which new Israels are not subject to unlimited government dictates. The life we lead, in which government can be wrong, controlling it because becomes a necessity, and the importance of protecting minorities in government is what made me love Israel to begin with. Now, I am not sure that there is anything in Israel that can limit the government and make the wrong decisions reasonable when they exceed fairness. It makes me feel abandoned by the Israel I loved when fairness is abandoned. I feel abandoned because until now I tried to do whatever I did all my life for the good of the entire Israel. Israel is a country of diverse political parties and religions. Yet Israel, for me, it was only one country. Different political parties operate within Israel, but what I did was always for Israel and not for a single party in it. I think that those in Israel who are fighting for this better Israel should win in the next election. Perhaps back to what Israel was before Netanyahu's latest. This may happen. But until it does, I do not know that there is anything that can be done to limit the reach of the government. The demonstrations, with the deeply felt effort to save whatever possible of the early, better Israel, will hopefully succeed. A better Israel is one in which there is counterbalance to keep things fair when they go wrong, because all governments do wrong on occasion. The question is fairness. The question is whether the country, not doing what Netanyahu's government tries to do, can prevail at the end in Israel. How would I feel if Israel became an extreme religious place, as subsidized by Netanyahu's legislation, becoming a place where everybody has to be part of the religious majority? I think I would feel as abandoned then as I feel now. I am deeply impressed by the Israeli demonstration for fairness and the reactions to Netanyahu's overreach. I believed in a Jewish state with fairness for all. Half of Jewish Israel feels this way. I am abandoned by a government which does not feel that way. A government which chose to subsidize the far-out extremes by buying votes while removing checks and balances. Comparing American courts and legislature to that of Israel in many ways shows us what our American future could hold in dire circumstances. There is such a parallel, a sobering comparison to be made to what the past U.S. administration tried to do in limiting or outright controlling judicial authority and American drive for fairness, and what Netanyahu and his legislature in Israel are attempting to actually accomplish. As of now, the people of Israel are standing up in demonstration, fighting for their democracy. The same cannot be said for the United States under similar threat. A country that can mobilize as Israel does to overturn what they think is the wrong approach to law gives hope. A country which fights for the return of responsibility in between elections gives hope. The country in which people stand up for what they believe, an exciting country. We in America must look to what is happening in Israel for a profound view of what could be our own future. With hectic developments, you may wish to read to yourself the latest issue of Haaretz, for developments in Israel are too many and happening too quickly to follow in this talk. Thank you. This is now the part of the discussion where I would normally ask for questions and engage in discussion. Since I cannot be with you this year, please reach out via email to Ephraim _Margolin @yahoo.com.